Welcome, everybody. My name is Jordan Bender. I'm a managing director at Goldman Sachs, and I'm chair of the finance and business division of the um, professionals network at the Jewish Federation of LA. And I'm also a member of the Federation's board of directors here. And I really want to thank all of you for joining us this afternoon. I'm very, very honored to be able to introduce our guest speaker in the main event for this afternoon, Russell Goldsmith. Russell, as many of you know, is one of the leaders in the financial industry in Los Angeles. He's the chairman of City National Bank and RBC US Wealth Management. Russell and his family have been dedicated supporters of the Federation for decades. The CEO of the Jewish Federation, Jay Sanderson, is here with us, and he's going to start an interview with Russell. And the topic, as you all know, is kind of what the economic outlook is going to be for Los Angeles, what job growth is going to look like for the economy post the pandemic, which we're all kind of eagerly looking to get through. Just again, by way of background, Russell's also the founder and chairman of the LA Coalition for Economies and Jobs, which is an independent organization of local leaders. It's been focused on fostering economic and job growth here in LA since 2010. He's been the chairman of the LA Economy and Jobs Committee, which was created by the Mayor Villaraigosa in 2006. Russell, I know, did a very interesting interview recently with the LA Times as well. So we're all very excited to hear Russell's perspective on the economy and particularly on what's going on in LA. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jay and to Russell. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Jordan. So Russell, we are truly living through an extraordinary moment, one that we've never seen, and I hope one we never see again. How do you see this moment, and how are you thinking about it, both in your role at City National and at RBC, and also your role in the city of Los Angeles?
Well, that's a big set of questions. First, let me say hello. It's a pleasure to be with you and pleasure to be with so many people that are involved with the Jewish Federation and business and professions. The Federation, as Jordan said, means a lot to me and did to my father and to our whole family. And so it's a pleasure to be here and to be talking with all of you. I was actually, as you might imagine, thinking about this. So many people in this Zoom thing are involved in business in one way or another, and will remember in its heyday, GE used to boast about their Six Sigma process. And as I think about what we're all living through, I've decided to call it a six seismic process. This, I think, is a truly unprecedented time certainly in our lives and I think in American history. Think of the six things that are happening all at once for everybody. Obviously the pandemic. So we're all at risk. 200,000 people just about have died already, with the numbers continuing. We've gone through a very abrupt recession. Third, we're seeing a lot of trends accelerate. The digitization, if you will, of our economy and to some degree our lives. Fourth, as California exemplifies right now, sadly, the climate crisis, what's going on outside. The fact that between the virus and the fires, breathing has become an issue that none of us used to think about. You can't breathe outside, and you better not be inside breathing. And fifth, the political uncertainties that face our country right now, the polarization between our two parties, our two presidential candidates, and frankly, the polarization between probably 40% of America on one side and 40% on the other. At least maybe it's 48 and 48. It's polarized. And sixth, we've seen the demands, understandably, for racial equality, social and economic justice really explode, literally and figuratively, into a very important and powerful demand for change, and I think, sadly, a counterbalancing demand to resist that change. So all 6 of those, I think, are seismic events in our lives right now. And it's a combustible, unpredictable mixture as to how this is going to play out. So that means it's an unsettling time. It's a period of change. And I think we all know people don't do well with change. And right now, everybody's having to deal with a lot of change. So I think that 6 seismic umbrella, Jay, is kind of overhanging everything that we're going to talk about today.
So if we start at the beginning of what you said in terms of, a recession, depending on who you talk to, or in my case, depending on who I talk to, this economy looks different, right? It looks different to people who are unemployed for sure. And it looks different to people who are, heavily invested in tech stocks. So, and as I said to you the other day, one lesson that I've learned, and I'm not a financial expert, is the stock market is not an indicator of our economy. So you said that we kind of dipped into a recession. For people that are listening now to this webcast, what should they be looking at in terms of financial indicators in their own lives? And what do you think we should be looking forward in the days and weeks to come as we move forward in the pandemic?
Well, let me talk first about what I think the economy looks like. And people have tried to come up with a little graphic description. At first, it was going to be a V or a W or a swoosh or a U. And I think right now it's looking more like a K. In fact, I would call it a K2 economy. And by that, I mean, if you picture the letter K, part of the letter is going up. At City National, we talk about the way up. For an enormous amount of this economy is going well. You mentioned technology. I mean, Amazon's on fire. The stay-at-home economy. Anybody who can work from home. Jordan at Goldman can work from home. At City National, I can work from home. It's amazing to me that City National Bank, as an example, even though all our branches are open, 85% of our people are working from home. That wouldn't have been possible 10 years ago. So if you're in that upward thrust of the letter K, if that's your part of the economy, you're doing somewhere between okay and well, and business as usual, more or less. And in many areas like tech, it's explosively positive. But the K also has that downward slant. And that's where you get businesses that depend upon being physically together in some, some way or another. So whether it's a restaurant, whether it's an airplane, whether it's a vacation in a hotel, whether it's live sports, live entertainment, physically working in places, that part of the economy is really suffering. And so, people talk about a tale of two cities, a tale of two economies. I think that's the prism that you have to look through. And obviously there are some people, the K metaphor goes only so far. There are some businesses in the business. But the reason I say K2 is I don't think we should just focus on businesses. We need to focus in on the people that make those things work, both profitable businesses and nonprofits. Education, well, obviously temples, the fact that nobody can go to shul this Friday night. That the people that work in these places, if you're in the downward part of that K and you have to show up, or be unemployed. So I think that's part of what gets lost sight of by some people. That's also why we have 13.6 million unemployed people and something like 23 million underemployed people. So that's the prism I would look at the economy. Is your business, is the work you do sustainable outside of a physical presence or not?
And a lot of the people that are on this call are in the real estate world. It seems to be a confusing sector from the outside. How are you looking at the real estate industry through this prism?
Well, I think that prism that I've just described helps you to understand the real estate business. So for example, and obviously at City National, we do finance a lot of real estate, and we ourselves are a tenant of a lot of real estate. Certain areas This is like the Northridge. Remember the Northridge earthquake? And certain
Yeah.
parts of LA were damaged and certain parts were perfectly fine. That's sort of what's happening in real estate. If you're in residential real estate or multifamily real estate, people still need a place to live. And setting aside for a moment the issue of people who can't pay their rent and foreclosures and stuff, generally speaking, certainly what we're seeing in our client base, multifamily real estate is continuing to do well. In some places, rents are down or there are issues with delinquencies, but generally speaking, because as I said, that upward part of the economy, the upward K, those people are, you're still working at Netflix, you're getting paid and you're paying your rent. But if you own a hotel that's vacant, if you're in some type of real estate that, like, for example, big department stores, the acceleration of the trend into digital online shopping, we've seen a number of bankruptcies. So if you own shopping malls, you've got some real challenges depending upon what kind of a center you have. If it's enclosed, you're worse off than if it's outside. Restaurants. So you're seeing retail, restaurants, hotels, office to varying degrees being challenged. But you're seeing industrial warehouse, which are part of the online digital economy. Industrial's doing great, multifamily's doing well, single family's doing well as people are home more. And you're seeing the businesses around home improvement do well because people are home more. So this, I think without stretching it too far, this prism of the K helps you to see where would real estate do well and where wouldn't it.
So you've had a lot of roles in your life beyond just being the CEO and now chairman of City National. In 2008, you were on the Federal Advisory Council. You were on the Federal Advisory Council when we had our last economic tanking, or whatever we would want to call it. People are often referencing 2008, 2009 with today. What do you think we learned from that we're applying? What's different?
Well, that's a great question. I had the dubious pleasure of being up close with the Federal Reserve. Federal Advisory Council, as I think you know, Jay, it is one bank CEO for each of the 12 Federal Reserve districts. And we met every quarter with the Board of Governors. Our task, which is part of the law, was to advise the Fed. So we were there up close and very much involved in the dialogue. And it was a privilege and an opportunity to be there as the Fed really broke ground. 08 started out okay, and obviously by the third quarter, we were plunging toward what Chairman Bernanke later talked about, the possibility of a Great Depression. And so it was an incredibly intense period. It had been triggered, as many will remember, by the housing crisis, subprime mortgages, which I have to add, City National never made subprime mortgages. And we did fine, we got through that period. But a lot of places did subprime mortgages, housing prices plummeted. So it was a financial crisis and a housing crisis that triggered that, as well as a lot of speculation and securities around those industries. This is a very different recession, much shorter, much sharper, triggered by basically a self-induced economic coma driven by the government trying to cut off the virus. Sadly, they gave up that attempt at the federal level, and that's a whole other story. But to your question, in 08, 09, we were blessed to have Ben Bernanke chairing the Fed, and we had a strong team on the Board of Governors. And really, they had to take extraordinary steps and invent extraordinary steps, working at times with the Congress and the White House. The passage of TARP and the financial relief on the fiscal side was a big step late in 08. The kind of quantitative easing that the Fed engaged in, obviously lowering rates, they pushed the monetary policy program aggressively and did a number of other things, invented a number of other things. So what I think 08, 09 does in this recession as they say, history doesn't usually repeat, but it often rhymes. And that's what's happening here. Under Jay Powell, the chair of the Fed, you're seeing the Fed, I think, be able to move much faster and the Congress move much faster because they'd been through the 08-09 experience. A lot of lessons were learned and a lot of architecture was created. So the CARES Act was sort of what was done in two steps in 08-09 between the Bush and Obama administrations. They did it all in one big chunk right away. The Fed took rates down fast. They put in a number of additional liquidity measures. It was easier, I think, for both ends of the government to act this way because of the lessons and the success that the Fed, Paulson, Geithner, and others had driven in 08-09. So the recessions caused differently and I think have different lingering effects, but the tools from the government are pretty much based on what we created in 08-09.
And in terms of between now and the election, what do you see happening economically and what should people be prepared for? Because, I talk about COVID as if it's a 4-act play. First act was the immediate onslaught, and that what happens after the vaccine will be different and also be delayed. The psychology of people getting out, the vaccines are not going to necessarily change people's behavior for a little while. But I feel like this in the nonprofit world and for the Federation, this is 5 years of recovering in terms of people feeling good enough to increase their philanthropy and get engaged. And do you think that the next few months are going to look a certain way before the election? And do you also think that no matter who the president is, when we do have a vaccine, there'll be some other course corrections that people should be aware of or think about?
Well, I think between now and the election, to your question, I don't see things changing all that much. The one kind of key government variable is, does the Congress reach an agreement and do they pass something in terms of relief that's needed for people who are unemployed, for extension of the PPP program for small business? There are a number of things that the Americans in that lower performing, the part of the economy that's really still in recession, will they get some relief? But even if Congress passed it tomorrow morning, it's not going to get into the bloodstream of the economy very soon. So I don't think much changes. I think once we know where the country's going politically, then I think people can start to make some plans, whether it's around taxes or policies or whatever. But using that earthquake metaphor again, I agree with you, Jay. I think that the lingering effects, the tremors, the aftershocks of this sharp recession, the loss of life, the isolation, and the delay. First of all, we don't know when there'll be a vaccine, hopefully soon. But we know already there are a lot of Americans who don't want to take the vaccine, will be skeptical. Who wants to be first? We're not going to, by definition, even if it's safe, we don't know what the effects will be 6 months, a year later, because nobody's had time to study that. So I think people will come out from under their shelter carefully, slowly, in some ways. But in other ways, people are eager to go see the Dodgers, eager to go out to dinner, go to a restaurant, go on that vacation. So I think the people from the upper part of the economy where they're doing well, I think they're going to be eager to get out and do some of the things that they can't do. But then there's the other part of the economy, the small business that's never coming back, the jobs that are never coming back, the kids who haven't been in school. I mean, we're paying a tremendous price for this period. Additional homelessness, additional isolation, depression, loss of income. Most people don't have money in the stock market, and they're eating up whatever savings they've had. And that's going to continue to be a drag on the economy. So there's going to be a lot of questions around health. It's going to take a long time before we have herd immunity, whether it's through vaccines or otherwise. So the good news is the third quarter, we're going to see a real pop up in GDP. Fed chair basically give a stay the course that monetary policy will be low and very, very supportive of economic growth. So and I think once we get through the election, you will see some kind of fiscal package, particularly if the Democrats get control. You'll see a big fiscal package, kind of like what the House passed, $3+ trillion. And I would argue we need to do a recovery package on top of that, not just the relief package. So it's going to take time. All those things take time. But the economy, most of the economy is doing well. And you're seeing that in the pickup of consumer spending. We've seen employment come back more strongly than even the Fed expected. So you're right. It's going to take time. We will have lost wealth. We'll have lost education. We'll have lost time. We'll have lost lives. But I think hopefully there will be a vaccine. And once we have an effective vaccine or multiple vaccines, then I think you'll see pent-up demand kick in, and we'll be not off to the races, but we will be on the way up for sure.
So we've been talking about the federal government, but one of the things people are talking about a lot is cities and states going bankrupt. And here we are in the state of California. My wife is always saying to me, maybe we should leave, right? The tax rates are going to be too high, and it's going to be hard to live in California, separate from the environmental challenges we're facing. What about, the failure of cities financially and the failures of states as we move forward through this?
Well, you're bringing up a really important point. And to go back to your earlier question, one of the lessons in 08-09 was the federal government failed. The Republicans prevented the Obama administration from giving relief to state and local governments. And that proved to be a real mistake because state and local governments laid off people. And so while the federal government was stimulating some growth, it was at the same time stimulating the firing of a lot of people. And you're seeing that fight play out again now. I think Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats, Chuck Schumer, are fighting very hard because those two states in particular, California and New York, are really suffering from the loss of tax revenue that they need to provide the services that most people in our state and in every state depend upon. We do, the media and all of us, we focus so much on the president and the Congress, but the reality is most of what people feel in their day-to-day life, the roads that we drive on, the schools that our kids are in, the health care that's provided, police protection or whatever, local services, fire, health care, and so forth. And that's a real problem because the state of California, like other states, is not legally supposed to run a deficit. So if they don't get the kind of relief package that the Democrats passed in the House, you will see more layoffs and furloughs. You'll see the decline of services at the state and local level. That will be part of why it's going to be slower coming out of this recession than it should be. I hope that the Republicans would take the lessons learned in 08-09 and support funding for fire and police and education at the local level. But so far they've resisted that. And that's a problem.
Right. So another layer of all of this is what seems to be a migration out of cities, right? So, there's a lot of talk of people leaving New York City. There's talk of people leaving Los Angeles. How do you see if this is true, if this comes to be, especially our children's generation leaving because they don't need to, and because obviously the technological value of this is people are working from home, businesses did pivot. How do you see that playing in? So the cities are a challenge financially and people leave the cities.
Well, I think there are a number of variables at play there. Obviously right now, as we've discussed, so many people not only can work at home, but have to work at home. And I think are learning from that it's great to be able to work at home maybe 1 day or 2 days a week. But I know both at City National and RBC Wealth Management. In fact, I was talking to the CEO of RBC in Toronto this afternoon. And we all agree that over time, and I think Jordan would agree with this, every firm, and you must be feeling it at the Federation, you miss that ability to get people in a room, to brainstorm, to share ideas, to maintain and develop culture. The values at City National are an important part of what our company is about. And you need that reinforcement, that being in the room together for any number of reasons. So I think, nobody knows in so many ways what the after effect, are you going to never go to a movie theater again? No, I think people will still go to movie theaters, but I don't think they will go as often because you've got a big screen at home and you've got all these streaming services. So things are changing. Will people not go to the office? I think the answer to that is no, but maybe they'll go 3 days a week, not 5 days a week, which would be good for commuting, good for the environment, good for wear and tear on people. And so if I'm right about that, you're not going to necessarily want to live in Palm Springs if you have to be in the office in downtown LA 3 days a week. Some people might, but I think cities have shown through thousands of years their resilience. And so I think cities will be fine. There'll be some dislocation. I think, if California raises their taxes much more, you're going to see people, as we've seen some major businesses take jobs out of here, like Toyota, Wells Fargo, B of A. They've hollowed out. Other businesses have moved to Nevada, moved to Texas. So I think we get through the health challenge, we get a vaccine that works, and over time you'll see people coming back into the city.
So you just referenced it, Jordan referenced it in his introduction. One of the things that I've always admired about City National Bank, and clearly it's comes from your dad and your family, is your total commitment to community and to philanthropy. And so I'd love to know from your perspective where that came from and how you see that now, because in fact we need the corporate world, we need people to step up even more through these challenges. And your family and your bank has been a bedrock institution in Beverly Hills and Los Angeles, not just in the Jewish community, but in the general community.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Look, our bank was started in 1954 by a group of local entrepreneurs, including my grandfather. And they started with an impulse that there were a lot of people, especially Jewish people, that were not being well served by the big corporations of the day. And so I think City National's impetus was to help the community, help the Jewish community, and help the community at large. And we've continued that philosophy for 66 years. We talk about 4 key constituents, obviously shareholders, and obviously clients, but we value the communities and our colleagues as also being part of what our mission is about. So that's part of our DNA. And it's not just about writing checks. We get our colleagues involved. I'm very proud of our colleagues. We have a workplace giving campaign, so our colleagues give, City National gives. We just marked this year, we had made 5 years ago an $11 billion pledge, not just to donate money, but to lend for community development loans, affordable housing, as well as contributions to nonprofits. And, we're part of this community. We're headquartered in Los Angeles. We're committed to the community. We support our clients. Oftentimes we're involved in things that our clients are involved in, so we can help them and help the community. And I think that's what our bank is about. It's what RBC is about, help our clients and our communities thrive and prosper. So that, when the healthcare crisis started, as you know, Jay, we stepped up and gave an additional $2 million because we recognized the communities we're in, from New York to Los Angeles to San Francisco, were going to be hurting. And when the George Floyd murder happened and the focus on racial justice became more apparent, we stepped up, and between ourselves and our colleagues and our company, we gave another $400,000 to causes aimed at racial justice. I think, it's just part of our values. We're committed to the community, and hopefully we can lead by example. I noticed we're now ranked in the top 10 corporate donors in Los Angeles. I'm proud of that. We're not the biggest company in Los Angeles, but we think it's the right thing to do, and it's part of what the whole mission of City National has been and will always be.
I will look forward to driving to work when we can drive to work and seeing the Goldsmith name on the top of the Jewish Federation building. So I know that Jordan has a question or two. So I see Jordan now. Jordan, would you like to ask our friend a question or two?
Sure. And I just want to, say, Russell, that, look, we share a lot of clients at Goldman Sachs with City National, and, your firm really has a Hamisha culture. You guys have an unbelievable group of people. You're incredibly service oriented. The clients that we share love City National. And what you have done, it's very hard to follow in the footsteps of someone like your father, but what you've done to continue to maintain the culture and grow the company is really phenomenal. And what you do for the Jewish community, for us in Los Angeles, is really beyond words. And really, it's been a pleasure to get to know you a little bit at Temple, but I look forward to, many more times in person. And I do think this idea about not just the idea sharing, but the mentoring and training, you and I are both getting into the, later innings of our career, but I think it's really important because we had great mentors and people that trained us that we're able to give back to the junior people. I think that's an important part of being in person. Jay touched on, I think, this problem that we're all affected by in Los Angeles, that it feels like it's creeping, it continues to creep up. We see boarded up buildings, and we see this intractable homeless problem. And I wanted to get your perspective on that, given your seat with the LA, Economic Development Group. The homeless problem just seems to be getting worse and worse and spreading around our city. And it just breaks your heart as a citizen. What can we do about that, in the post-COVID world?
Well, let me answer your question, but first let me thank you, Jordan, for what you said about me and my father and our company. And I couldn't agree with you more about mentoring. And, I was blessed by having the world's greatest mentor in my dad. So, that made it very easy for me to be committed to the Federation and to the values of the Jewish people. And I think my dad and I both felt very strongly about community and colleagues and doing the right thing. And I think you're right. I think part of what I'm excited by, I'm happy to see us supporting the work you and Jay and the Business and Professions group is doing, is making sure those Jewish values are strengthened among our Jewish leaders here in Los Angeles, because they're just so important. There's more to life than just making money. And I think many of us know that, and it's important that everybody in the Jewish community recognizes that. The homeless issue that you point to actually is something we've worked on at the Los Angeles Coalition for the Economy and Jobs. And we actually work closely with McKinsey and Company, and they published a big report on this some months ago. We worked closely with the Garcetti administration. The taxpayers also voted a big fund to build housing, and it's so far been a grave disappointment, partly because the way the bond and issue works, it's costing the city over $500,000 a unit to build housing for homeless people. And a friend of mine's developing a luxury apartment building for $400,000 a unit. So there's something crazy in that they can't seem to break through. And I think there are a lot of less expensive alternatives, some of which I've proposed, things like trailers and so forth, that I'm actually working to see if we can't do a pilot project. But I think government is really challenged to do this. There's just so many competing interests. And at the same time, in fairness, I think a lot of housing has been provided. They've bought motels, they've rented rooms, they've done a lot of things. but the number of people who are falling into the category of homelessness keeps going. And what I think people don't realize, and our report did reflect, is a number of people that are homeless are people who lost their job. Maybe it was an illness or something, and they couldn't afford their rent, and now suddenly they're on the street. And so government's having a tough time, even though they're challenged to get units. They're getting units. I think they've gotten a number of units, but the flow in of people who are on the street, kicked out, can't pay their rent, keeps growing. And I think that problem is exacerbated now in this healthcare crisis, because what you're seeing is a lot of families that are living in their car or on the street, where their kids at least could go to public school, get a couple hot meals, maybe take a shower, use the bathroom. They can't do that because their schools are closed. So this is a crisis of huge dimensions. I'm sure the Federation is doing what they can do. I know Wilshire Boulevard Temple is doing a lot with their food bank, but I think the crisis is so large. In fact, I'm about to write another check to SOVA, because I think we all have to do something more for these people who are homeless or people who are going hungry. The hunger in America is just a scandal, and a scandal that the leadership in Washington doesn't seem to be doing anything about.
Yeah, food insecurity. The number of people that are poor in Los Angeles is growing exponentially daily, and food insecurity is the #1 challenge.
I'm optimistic that we will see a change in the political leadership. We'll see a change in the healthcare requirements. And basically, you have to be an optimist when you look at the history of America. And particularly as a Jew in America, you have to recognize this is the greatest country in the world. It's got its problems, its challenges right now. But I do think the quote of Martin Luther King that slowly the arc of history bends toward justice. I do believe that. It's painful. It doesn't go forward all the time. It has challenges, as we see right now. But I do think ultimately we will get to a more and more perfect union.
So Russell, I want to thank you on behalf of everybody listening, and certainly on behalf of the Jewish community. As I said earlier, the Jewish community owes a great debt of gratitude to City National Bank because it cares so much, not just about the Jewish community, but all of Los Angeles. And frankly, you're not just a local bank anymore. I want to thank you for being a Goldsmith, and the Goldsmith name is an important name in the history of this Jewish community and in the future of this Jewish community, through you and through your children, and probably through your grandchildren for what I see already. So thank you for that. As we approach Rosh Hashanah, I want to wish everybody on this call a Shana Tova. I wish everybody a healthy and safe new year. I do believe that we are going to get through this stronger. There will be disruption, there will be change in the Jewish community, but we will get through it together, and we'll get through it because of the strength of this Jewish community. And the strength is so much a part of the DNA of the Goldsmith family and City National Bank. So thank you, Russell. Thank you, Jordan. Shana Tova to everybody, and good afternoon.
Shana Tova. Thank you. And thank you for your work, Jay and Jordan.
Thank you, guys.